My name is Harper Alden, and on the day that was supposed to mark the start of my new life, I learned exactly where I stood in my family. My wedding day was a humid July afternoon at the old church on Maple Road, the kind of sticky summer heat that made my curls flatten, and my mother fret about frizzy hair in every photograph. But the real tension in the room had nothing to do with the weather. I remember Sloane, my older sister, standing at the head table, her designer dress shimmering in the chandelier light, her glass of Prosecco raised high. She smiled that careful, camera-ready smile of hers, the one that always made me feel like I was being measured. "To Harper and Miles," she began, her voice floating across the hall, "may they always find happiness playing in the mud together." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel in volume, but it was sharp enough to cut through me. I could feel my cheeks burning as hundreds of eyes turned my way. Some were amused, some were curious, but none of them really saw me. Miles, my husband, squeezed my hand under the table. His palm was rough, warm, grounding. He whispered, "Let them have their moment. We know who we are." I managed a tight smile for the cameras, but inside I was fraying. My mother's voice hissed in my ear. "Smile, Harper! People are watching." They always were. This was my family. Sloane, the golden child with the six-figure Manhattan address, and a husband who treated investing like a blood sport. My parents, Walter and Denise, who'd never quite learned to hide their disappointment that I traded boardrooms for barns. And Miles, whose jeans were still dusty from a sunrise check of the irrigation lines that morning. My wedding dress was my grandmother's, altered by hand, the only thing about that day that truly felt like me. I lifted my glass of water, too practical, I guess, for Prosecco, to Sloane and forced a toast of my own. "To family," I said, my voice clear, "and to finding out who's really got your back when it matters." For a second, her smile flickered. It was the smallest victory, but it was mine. I should have known, standing there with Miles's hand in mine, that this was just the beginning. That one day the balance would tip, and when it did, the mud Sloane mocked would be worth more than she could ever imagine. 3 years passed after that wedding, and not a single family gathering went by without someone reminding me, subtly or not, of the life I'd chosen. I remember the first summer reunion at Sloane's sprawling new house in the suburbs, with its manicured lawn and stone fountain bubbling in the driveway. She greeted me on the doorstep with air kisses, then paused to eye the Pyrex dish I carried. "Oh, you brought food!" Her tone managed to sound both gracious and horrified. "Is it from your garden?" I nodded, setting my salad, fresh greens, goat cheese, pecans, on the polished granite counter beside the professionally catered spread. Garrett, her husband, sidled over, martini in hand, his perfectly tailored shirt bright against the kitchen's white marble. "So, Harper, how's life on the homestead?" he asked, as if it were a running joke at my expense. "Still growing kale, or have you leveled up to... what, carrots?" I kept my voice steady. "Alden Grove is doing well. We're supplying 2 local restaurants now, and the co-op is growing." It never seemed to matter. Garrett's eyebrows rose, his smirk flickering. "That's adorable," Sloane said, giving me a smile as brittle as spun sugar. "I always say it's good to have a hobby." I glanced across the room to where Miles chatted with Mira, my younger sister, who'd always tried to stay neutral in these family wars. Mira flashed me a sympathetic look as she poured iced tea into glasses. She knew how these nights went. Our mother, Denise, swept in next, beaming at Sloane and raving about her incredible work ethic. Dad trailed behind, already asking Garrett about investment opportunities, and didn't so much as look in my direction. Dinner was an endless reel of stories about Sloane's latest real estate flip, Garrett's rumored promotion, and my parents' upcoming cruise. I answered questions about the farm, about whether I regretted leaving teaching, about why I never moved back to the city, always with that gentle undercurrent of, "When will you grow up?" Even Mira, sitting quietly with her drink, looked uncomfortable. As dessert arrived, imported chocolate mousse, artfully plated by Sloane's caterer, she made a show of comparing her life to mine. "You know, Harper, some of us are just built for big things. Others, Well, you make the world greener, and that's important too, I guess. The table laughed politely. I felt Miles's hand on my knee, steadying me. I just smiled and took another sip of my water, letting them think they'd won. But I saw the cracks. Tiny at first, but there. A tension behind Sloane's laughter. A quick flash of something like envy in Garrett's eyes when I talked about sunsets over our fields. They didn't see it, but I did. I was learning to stop wanting to belong and start wanting to be free. 6 months after that reunion, as the first snow dusted the fields around Alden Grove, I stood at my kitchen sink, peeling potatoes for dinner, when my phone buzzed on the windowsill. It was a text from my mother, short and oddly formal. Family meeting at the house Saturday. Please come. Important. For as long as I could remember, the words family meeting had always signaled trouble, never celebration. Miles found me frowning at my phone. Is everything okay? He asked, drying his hands on a towel after stacking wood outside. Mom wants us at their place this weekend, I replied. She says it's important. He raised an eyebrow. Do you think it's about Sloane and Garrett? Your dad's been calling a lot lately, right? I nodded. I'd noticed my parents were checking in more than usual, but their updates felt rehearsed, their voices strained. That night, Mira stopped by for tea. She lived in town now, teaching 3rd grade, and kept her own distance from the family drama. We sat around the kitchen table, while Miles quietly prepped seed trays in the mudroom. You got the text too? Mira asked, blowing on her mug. Yep, something's off. Sloane's been snappish, and Mom avoided talking about their trip to the Bahamas. Did you notice? Mira glanced away, thoughtful. I heard a rumor at school. Someone said Garrett's firm lost a big client. She's been talking about budgeting, which is new for her. I glanced at Miles, who was pretending not to listen, but his hands had stilled. Harper, we should brace for something, he said softly. It feels like they want us for more than moral support. Mira pressed her lips together. They haven't asked me for money, she said quietly, but I think they might, soon. As Saturday approached, I found myself watching the fields more than usual, counting the steady, ordinary blessings I'd built away from the rest of them. Miles and I talked late into the night, lying in bed and listening to the wind whistle through the old windows. If they're in trouble, do we owe them anything? He asked gently. No, I said, though my voice shook, but they'll ask anyway. Saturday came gray and cold, the kind of weather that made every memory sharper. I baked a loaf of bread to bring, more out of habit than hope. On the drive to my parents' house, Miles reached over and took my hand. Whatever they want, Harper, you don't owe them your life. You know that, right? I squeezed his fingers. I know. I just wish I didn't care so much. Their house looked smaller than I remembered. The porch light was already on, though it was barely 3 o'clock. Mira's car was parked outside, and inside, my parents were waiting in the living room, their faces drawn. Sloane and Garrett sat side by side, both paler and thinner than I'd ever seen them. No one stood up to greet us. Thank you for coming, my father said, formal and tired. I could tell from the way he twisted his wedding ring that this was going to be a long afternoon. I sat down, the bread still warm in my lap, and braced myself for whatever was coming, knowing deep down that nothing would ever be the same after today. The silence hung heavy as we settled into the living room, the only sound the ticking of the old wall clock and the soft hiss of the heater. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and my father kept glancing at a thick envelope on the coffee table. Sloane twisted a napkin in her lap, her confidence drained. Garrett's jaw was set tight, and he barely looked at anyone. Let's just say it, Sloane finally blurted, voice wavering. We need help! She glanced at Garrett, who pressed his lips together and stared at the carpet. We made some investments, she continued, and things turned bad. Garrett's firm was over-leveraged. We lost more than we could handle. My father cleared his throat, suddenly stern. It's not just about Sloane and Garrett. The house is mortgaged. The retirement accounts are nearly gone. If we don't act, the bank will take everything. His voice cracked, and he looked away. Denise reached across the table for my hand. We know it's a lot to ask, Harper, but you and Miles. Alden Grove is the only thing in this family still worth anything. We want you to consider selling the farm. With the money, we could pay the debts, save the house, start over. She squeezed my fingers, desperate. It would mean the world to us. My breath caught. I looked at Miles, whose jaw had gone rigid, and at Mira, who stared down at her folded hands. Sloane's eyes filled with tears. Harper, you always talked about family, about doing what's right. Please, if you ever loved us, don't let everything fall apart. The old anger surged in my chest, hot and sharp. You want me to sell my home? My work? Everything Miles and I have built? My father shifted in his seat. It's just land. You can always start again. We can all move forward together. Miles spoke, his voice even. You're asking us to sacrifice our future to pay for your mistakes. How is that fair? Garrett's cheeks flushed. It's not about blame, he snapped. It's about survival. Family helps family. I set the bread on the coffee table. For years, you all made it clear I was less than. You mocked our choices, dismissed what we built, and now you expect us to save you? Sloane's composure broke. I'm sorry for all of it, okay? I was proud. I was wrong. But please, Harper, this is bigger than old wounds. We're drowning. Denise began to cry softly. You don't have children yet, Harper, but imagine if you did. Imagine watching everything slip away and having to beg for help. The plea hit somewhere deep, but so did the exhaustion of a lifetime spent being the afterthought. I turned to Miles, searching his face. He nodded, silent, letting me know I was not alone. I stood up. I can't give you an answer right now, and honestly, I don't know if you'll like the answer when I do. Mira, can you drive me home? My voice didn't shake. I was done letting them see me falter. Mira rose immediately, grabbing her keys. The rest stayed silent as we left. Out in the cold air, she took my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, she whispered. And for the first time in years, I almost believed it. The drive home with Mira was silent, but for the hum of the tires on frozen pavement. I watched snow begin to gather in the roadside ditches, feeling both raw and strangely weightless. Mira squeezed my shoulder before she left. I meant what I said, she promised, then drove away into the dusk. Inside, Miles was waiting for me in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, kneading bread for tomorrow's market. You okay? He asked, and I nodded, but he didn't buy it. He wiped his hands and pulled me into a quiet embrace. Let's talk, he said. He led me through the mudroom and out to the old barn, where he kept his makeshift office. Just a battered desk, filing cabinets, and shelves lined with seed catalogs and battered field notebooks. There's something I've wanted to show you for a long time, he said, unlocking a drawer and pulling out a stack of folders. He laid them out on the desk, patent certificates, technical drawings, contracts. I know you've always thought of this as our farm, Miles began, but Alden Grove is more than that. I've been working on smart irrigation systems, developing new soil sensors, quietly, under the radar. I started Alden Agritech as a research wing 3 years ago. We run everything through the farm, testing, prototyping, selling. These, he tapped the patents, are all ours. The tech's being used from Iowa to upstate New York. I stared, stunned. All this time? He nodded. We've had grants from the Department of Agriculture, contracts with seed companies, even a university partnership. I wanted to be sure it worked before I told anyone, even you. I didn't want to jinx it. A dozen memories flashed through my mind. Miles tinkering in the shed until midnight. The sudden upgrades to our equipment. The quiet satisfaction on his face when we balanced the books. So why let my family treat us like we're nothing? Miles's eyes softened. I wanted to see what mattered to them, and to you. I needed to know if we were building something real, or just trying to prove ourselves to people who would never see us clearly. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry you felt alone. I thought I was protecting us. Maybe I was wrong. A strange mix of pride and hurt tangled inside me. I wish you'd told me. But I get it, Miles. I do. I need to know what's next. He smiled, a little sheepish. What's next is this. We're not selling. Alden Grove isn't just land. It's everything we've worked for. They'll come back, Harper. They'll push. But now you know what you're standing on. A slow certainty settled in my bones, like warmth spreading out from my core. Let them come, I said, and meant it. Late that night, I found myself out on the porch, wrapped in a quilt, watching the snow fall in silent drifts across the field. The farm lights glowed steady, and inside, the folders lay stacked, proof that I was no one's afterthought, not anymore. They arrived that Sunday afternoon in a line of sleek cars, their polished surfaces gleaming against the farmhouse's weathered wood. Through the kitchen window, I watched as my parents, Sloan, Garrett, and little Tiffany stepped onto our porch, bundled in city coats that looked out of place among the fields. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and heavy. Garrett wasted no time, slamming a leather folder onto the coffee table. We've brought the sale papers. The buyer is ready. You just need to sign, Harper. Sloan stood beside him, her usual confidence cracked by desperation. Please, Harper, we need this. Don't make us beg. Miles calmly stepped forward, placing a stack of his own folders next to theirs. He opened one to reveal patents, contracts, and letters from government agencies. Before anyone signs anything, know exactly what you're selling. Garrett squinted at the documents. What's all this? This, Miles said, tapping the top patent, is Alden Agritech. The technology developed right here on our farm over the past 3 years. We've patented irrigation systems, soil sensors, and more. This land isn't just dirt. It's a research hub worth millions. The room fell silent. Sloane's face paled, and my father looked down, speechless. Miles continued, sliding over contracts and client lists. You're proposing to sell to someone who recently tried to buy our technology license. We said no. This farm and business aren't for sale. Garrett's face drained of color. You let us believe you were struggling. Why? Miles met him steadily. To see who we really are when they thought we had nothing left. Sloane began to cry softly. Harper, I'm sorry. I never meant to. My mother's voice broke in. We're family. Doesn't that count for anything? I stood, voice firm. Family means nothing when it asks you to sacrifice everything for their mistakes. Garrett hissed. You'll regret this. You'll be alone, clinging to your dirt. Miles shook his head. We've built a future, something real. My father said nothing. Mira stepped forward, standing beside me quietly. If this is family, then I choose where I belong. They left without another word. The silence that followed felt like freedom, like the first breath after a long-held struggle. After they left, the house felt strangely lighter, almost as if the walls themselves had been released from years of tension and judgment. Miles and I sat together on the porch, wrapped in thick blankets against the crisp evening air. The snow was falling gently now, blanketing the fields that had become our refuge and the foundation of everything we'd built. Around us, the quiet settled deep and full, as if the world was finally exhaling. Shortly after, Mira joined us, her presence a steady comfort. She didn't say much, but when she did, it carried the weight of truth. Family isn't just the people you're born to. It's those who stand beside you when it counts. For the first time, I felt free, not trapped by expectations or the heavy burden of disappointment. My phone buzzed with an email from the Department of Agriculture, congratulating us on a $2.7 million grant to advance our drought-resistant crop research. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a future filled with innovation and hope, a future we'd fought to create on our own terms. I thought about Sloane, about the years of distance and silence between us. I felt no bitterness, only a quiet understanding. Healing wasn't about revenge. It was about peace, about choosing boundaries, and embracing the life I was meant to live. This is home, I told Miles softly, eyes tracing the golden light fading over the fields. Not because of the land itself, but because of what we've built together. He smiled, squeezing my hand with that gentle confidence I had fallen in love with years ago. One seed at a time, Harper. We're just getting started. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, I breathed deeply, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was exactly where I belonged, rooted, grounded, and finally free.